Found the verse. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivara Dhari. Jaya Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivara Dhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Padma Paramahansa, Parivajikacharya, Ashtotar, the Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajikacharya, Ashtotar, the Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Kvantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the sum of the devotees. All glories to the sum of the devotees. All glories to the sum of the devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Narayan Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Prabhupada, the author, and unto Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashtaprayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So, yesterday was the appearance day of Sri Gadadhar Pandit, and Maharaj wanted me to read about him today, so we will now read about him, and then we'll have the class on Bhagavatam. Okay. Here we go. Sri Gaurhari had so much affection for Sri Gadadhar Pandit that the Lord could not be without him for a moment. Gadadhar Pandit appeared a year after Lord Chaitanya. Gadai and Nimai were inseparable as childhood playmates. Peaceful, renounced, serious, self-composed, fond of solitude, Gadadhar proved quite a contrast to his bosom friend Gaur Rai, who was fickle, unsteady, and whimsical. In Gangadas Pandit's school, Nimai Pandit regularly teased Gadadhar by challenging him with illogical questions. Shri Kavi Karnapur states that in Braj Leela, Gadadhar Pandit is the daughter of King Rishabhanu, Srimati Radharani. Gadadhar Pandit served as Lord Gaura's chief assistant during his Navadvip Leela. Shri Shri Radhakrishna and Vrindavan appear as Gaur Gadadhar to perform pastimes in Navadvip in the forest groves beside the Ganges. Quote, this is from Chaitanya Charitamrita, "No one can describe the characteristics and ecstatic love of Gadadhar Pandit. Therefore, another name for Lord Chaitanya is Gadadhar Prananath, the life and soul of Gadadhar Pandit." One day, while wandering along the bank of the Ganges, Gaur Sundar entered a forest grove and sat in a meditative mood. Soon he became enraptured by remembering his Vrindavan pastimes. To enhance the Lord's mood, Mukunda Dutt began singing sweet songs in Purva Raga. Shri Gadadhar made a garland of fragrant forest flowers and lovingly placed it around the Lord's beautiful neck. As Shri Radha used to dress Damodar in Vrindavan, so Gadadhar would adorn the radiant form of Lord Chaitanya. Gadadhar would also decorate Lord Chaitanya's bed and bedroom with sweet-smelling flowers. Every day, Gadadhar would make sandalwood paste to rub on Lord Chaitanya's transcendental body. Gaur Gadadhar sat on the root of a tree, serving as a raised dais. Shri Nityananda Prabhu sat on Lord Chaitanya's right. Shivas Pandit decorated them with flowers. Shri Advaita Acharya offered aratik. Narahari waved the chamara. Shuklambar offered chandan, and Murari Gupta sang the Lord's glories. Vijay, Mukunda, Purushottam, Madhava, and Vasudev Ghosh sang a variety of songs in different ragas. In this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu performed his Nadia Leela. Now that's the song, the evening song that we don't sing so much here. How does it go? Yeah, the Gaurati. How does it start? He Bajayo Jaya Gora Chandra. He's just describing it here in this glorification of Gadadhar. Gadadhar Pandit also took the renounced order of life and went to Jagannath Puri to be with Lord Chaitanya. Accepting Chaitra Sannyas, in which a renunciate never leaves the Dham, Gadadhar served the deity of Tota Gopinath with full love and devotion. Regularly, Sri Krishna Chaitanya came to relish Sri Gadadhar's Rasika reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya concluded his manifest pastimes by entering into the deity of Tota Gopinath. Although Gadadhar Pandit was barely 48 when the Lord departed, he quickly became old because of the intense anguish he felt in separation from his beloved Lord Gaura Sundar. He couldn't stretch his arms to offer a garland to the deity. Understanding his servant's difficulty, Sri Tota Gopinath sat down to facilitate Gadadhar's loving service. To this day, Sri Tota Gopinath is the only sitting deity of Krishna. According to some authorities, a short time after Lord Chaitanya's disappearance, Sri Gadadhar Pandit joined his eternal pastimes by entering his beloved deity of Tota Gopinath. His tooth, Samadhi, Danta Samadhi, stands near the Vangshi Gopal temple in Vrindavan. Shri Gadadhar Pandit ki jai. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 28th day of April, 2025 in San Diego, a reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, HG Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're going to read several verses without purports, and then we'll read this verse which is on the board, which is what, 39? Okay. So I'm just going to, this is the 8th canto, 7th chapter, beginning text number 36. I'll just read the Sanskrit quickly in the English. Shri Shukovacha tadviksha vyasanang tasam kripaya vrishapiditaha sarva bhuta sarideva idamaha satim priyam. Srila Shukadev Goswami continued, Lord Shiva is always benevolent toward all living entities. When he saw that the living entities were very much disturbed by the poison, which was spreading everywhere, he was very compassionate. Thus he spoke to his eternal consort, Sati, as follows. My dear Bhavani, it's another name for Sati, just see how all these living entities have been placed in danger because of the poison produced from the churning of the ocean of milk. It is my duty to give protection and safety to all living entities struggling for existence. Certainly it is the duty of the Master to protect his suffering dependents. And then text 39, beginning pranay. Begins pranay? Someone say yes or no? Yes? Okay. Pranay, swai, praninaha, panti, sadavaha, chana, banganai, Baddha, Vaireshu, Bhuteshu, Mohiteshu, Atmamayaya, Pranay Svai Praninakpanti, Sadavak Chanabangurahi, Baddha Vaireshu Bhuteshu, Mohiteshvatmamayaya, Pranay Svai Praninakpanti, Sadavak Chanabangurayi, Bandhavaireshu 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 Bhuteshu, Mohiteshvatmamayaya. You want to try it? Pranay Svai Praninakpanti, Sadavak Chanabangurayi, Bandhavaireshu Bhuteshu, Mohiteshvatmamayaya. Anyone online?
Pranay Svai Praninakpanti,
Pranay Svai Praninakpanti,
Sadavakshana Bangurai,
Sadavak Chanabangurayi,
Badavaireshu Bhuteshu,
Bandhavaireshu Bhuteshu,
Mohiteshvatma Mayaya,
Mohiteshvatmamayaya. Pranay, by lives, Svai, their own, Praninaha, other living entities, Panti, protect, Sadavaha, devotees, Chanabangurayi, temporary, Bandhavaireshu, unnecessarily engaged in animosity, Bhuteshu, unto living entities, Mohiteshu, bewildered, Atmamayaya, by the external energy of the Lord. Translation. People in general, being bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are always engaged in animosity toward one another. But devotees, even at the risk of their own temporary lives, try to save them. Purport. This is the characteristic of a Vaiṣṇava. Paradukka dukkhi. A Vaiṣṇava is always unhappy to see the conditioned souls unhappy. Otherwise, he would have no business teaching them how to become happy. In materialistic life, people must certainly engage in activities of animosity. Materialistic life is therefore compared to samsara davanala. Sound familiar? First words of the Guru Vashtaka. A blazing forest fire that automatically takes place. Lord Shiva and his followers in the Parampara system try to save people from this dangerous condition of materialistic life. This is the duty of devotees, following the principles of Lord Shiva and belonging to the Rudra Sampradaya. There are 4 Vaishnava Sampradayas, and the Rudra Sampradaya is one of them, because Lord Shiva, or Rudra, is the best of the Vaishnavas, Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu. Indeed, as we shall see, Lord Shiva drank all the poison for the benefit of humanity. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, I just like to quote one verse from the 4th canto. Those who remember us going through the 4th canto. There was a point in which King Pachanabhari's sons, the Pachetas, were sent off to perform austerities, and they encountered Lord Shiva in the 4th canto. And he gave them a mantra called the Song of Lord Shiva. There's a chapter, I think, called the Song of Lord Shiva, chanting the Song of Lord Shiva. And that was one of the first parts of the Bhagavatam I ever read, because when I began working on the press, that was where they were, and I started proofreading that. And it was so enlivening that I started memorizing it, but it was a little long. I didn't quite get it much memorized. But there's one verse that came up. This is 4:24:52, which is near the end of the song. And it's really, Lord Shiva is revealing his heart there, his own desire. And he's giving us a nice meditation that we can take. So here's how it goes. The Sanskrit is beautiful. Padasha dat padma palasha rochisha nakad dubirnontam agangvadunvata padarshaya svim apasta sadvasam padam guru marga gurustamodrisham. So he's praying to Krishna. My dear Lord, your 2 lotus feet are so beautiful that they appear like 2 blossoming petals of the lotus flower that grows during the autumn season. Indeed, the nails of your lotus feet emanate such a great effulgence that they immediately dissipate all the darkness in the heart of a conditioned soul. My dear Lord, kindly show me that form of yours, which always dissipates all kinds of darkness in the heart of a devotee. My dear Lord, you are the supreme spiritual master of everyone. Therefore, all conditioned souls, covered with the darkness of ignorance, can be enlightened by you as the spiritual master. It's a very rich verse. It's wonderful. So this is really Lord Shiva revealing his heart. And this is part of the prayer, of the song, if you will, that he imparted to the Pachetas, who then went off and meditated underwater, chanting this prayer, for 10,000 years, I believe. At which point Vishnu appeared to them on Garuda. Now I think he came underwater, and he appeared underwater. And so then they came out, and by that time the whole world had been overgrown with trees, and they became kind of angry. They started burning the trees, and I forget who came down to cool them out, and But anyway, there's a whole pastime there. But I was just taken by Shiva's mood that he revealed there, his devotional mood. He's known as the best of Shiva. By the way, that phrase, Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu, it simply means just as Shiva. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that Shiva is the best Vaishnava. But in the context, it says just as the Ganges is the best river and so forth, and Shiva, the Shiva is the best Vaishnava. So that's who we're dealing with here. And one thing that I wanted to kind of just talk about here. First of all, Prabhupada in this purport, this phrase, para dukkha dukkhi. Can everyone understand how that works? Para means others. Dukkha is misery. Dukkhi, you accept that as your own misery. This is like the ultimate in called empathy. There's sympathy where you want to help others, but empathy kind of is even a stronger word. It means you're actually feeling the pain of others, and that's what Paradukha Dukhi means. Now we find that most ideally in Prahlad Maharaj. There's two famous verses which I've given you before and will give you again, because they're kind of essential to the Sankirtan mission, to the mood of Sankirtan. So what he's saying near the end of his prayers to Lord Nrsingadev, which are filled with all kinds of wonderful instruction and knowledge, he says, Naibod Vijay, Padaduratya Vaitaranyas, Tvadvi Yagayana Mahamata Magna Chitta, Shochetato Vimukacheta Se Indriyata Maya Sukaya Bodamudbahito Vimudhan. So there's a contrast there between his own mood that he's feeling internally and what he sees the conditioned souls are suffering. Because that's what this is. I mean, Shiva is here moved by compassion, because all this terrible poison which had been produced by the churning, it's a great quantity of terrific poison is now spreading, and then everyone's in the world will suffer from it. So he's tremendously moved. So what Prahlad is also similarly moved for everyone, not just for an individual. So he's saying, as far as I'm concerned, Naiv Udvijay, I am not disturbed at all. He used this word, Udvija, at the beginning of his instructions to his father. You remember his father? Who is his father? Who can say? Prahlad. Who's Prahlad's father? Yes, very good. Okay, you're all awake. So when his father, he didn't know that Prahlad was a devotee. You remember? Because he was instructed in the womb. He had no idea. So he's going to school. He wants to teach him to become a nice demon. And Prahlad is not absorbing any of that. What's going on here? Please. So it's the first day of school or something. So Hiranyakashipu takes him and he puts him on his lap and he smells his head. You know, it's all love and affection, even though he's a big demon. And he said, "What's the best thing you learned today, Prahlad?" You know. So he tells him, this is characteristics of the great devotees. They're not afraid to speak the truth, even, you know, if it's dangerous. Because what could be more dangerous? His father's a big demon, he's a fragile little boy. But he told him straight on. He said, Tat sarumanye sodavayadehinam sadasam udvignadiyama sadgahat. Notice that word udvigna, that's the same word he used in this prayer. Naiv udvijay, it's just a different form of it. So what he says there, the best thing I learned, oh, Father, but he doesn't call him Father, he calls him the best of the demons. Tat sarumanye asodavaya, best for whom? Probably explaining this first. For the embodied living soul, the conditioned soul. Dehina, dehinosmin, dehina. Dehina, who is sadasambudvignadiyam, a sadgrahat. Very, you know, Sanskrit is such a concise language. He's describing the whole situation of the suffering conditioned souls in this one line. Always beset by anxiety. Sada sambudvigna means disturbed, more or less, you know. Why? The intelligence, the consciousness, diyam, asadgrahat. And that's 4 syllables. He described the whole material situation. Asat means the impermanent, things which are always changing, like our material bodies, or anything else that you put your faith in this world. It's all temporary. Grahat means holding on for dear life, isn't it? I go to the example, we're right next to the ocean here. You have a boat, people like to take their pleasure boats out. So they have faith in the boat. You know, they've made sure that it's okay, that it's, you know, seaworthy and whatever. But somehow or other, something happens and the boat starts sinking. You know, so that's a sadgrahat. They're holding on to it. Now, great anxiety is coming, right? So what's the boat that we're in? This is a boat too. Each body is a boat, but it's a fallible boat. It's a boat that eventually will sink or just be destroyed. And then what happens to our sense of security? It's finished. You're in tremendous anxiety, unless you're a pure devotee. So that's the first 2 lines. So what should one do in that situation? And we're all in that situation. So he said, asadgrahat hit vatna patam griyamandakupam. You should give up, reject that which is atmapatam, which obstructs the progress of the soul. And what is that? The blind well of materialistic family life. Griham andakupam. Andakupam means a well you fall into in a field and you can't get out and you're just screaming, you know, death. So that's what totally materialistic family life or totally materialistic life of any kind is like a blind well. You may think that there's pleasure there or some security, but ultimately you're finished. So give that up. Then what should you do? You see? Vanam gatoyad haramashriyeta. Go to the vana. What does vana mean? Vrindavana? Forest. Go to the forest, Vrindavan forest, and take shelter of Hari. The last thing he wanted to hear, Hiranyakashipu, his arch enemy who killed his brother, Hiranyaksha, his beloved brother, Why did they both their names have the word Hiranya in it? What's that word, Hiranya, mean? Gold. So Hiranyaksha, he's always looking for gold. How can I get more gold? Prabhupada said that he mined so much gold from the earth that it fell into the ocean, right? It fell into the garbage. That's how they became unbalanced. And his brother, Hiranyakashipu, he's also after gold and soft bedding. And Prabhupada says, and the bed companion. So, money and sex, this is demonic. So what does Prahlad say? He says, I'm fine. He said, na udvija. I just was explaining that word udvija. Naiva udvija, I'm not at all disturbed. Paradoratjaya vaitaranyas. Because I'm already with you on the other side of the Vaitarani river. This is a river between the material and spiritual world, I'm with you because I'm your devotee. I don't, I'm completely. And he proved it by withstanding all the torments that they tried to. He wasn't tormented. They're trying to kill this little fragile little boy. Kill him. He's a devotee. And he's our arch enemy. His demonic father. So you've seen these paintings, they had the spears, and they threw him off the mountain, put him and crushed him under the elephant, put him in a big boiling pot of ghee, maybe not even ghee, maybe just saffron oil, saffron oil. And he didn't feel anything, and his father was freaked out by that, because that's a tremendous strength when you can go through all these so-called torments and not be disturbed at all. But then he says something amazing in the latter part of the verse. Shoche, I'm lamenting. What are you lamenting for? You just said that, Shoche tato vimukha cetasa indriyartha. Vimukha cetasa. Now, mukha means face. Vimukha means turning your face away. Turning your consciousness away. Vimukha cetasa indriyartha. Those who have turned away from you, my Lord, for the sake of sense gratification, indriya priti indriyartha. Maya Sukhaya, they're looking for illusory, ephemeral, temporary happiness, and bearing a great burden in striving for this in the material world. Anyone who's totally dedicated to sense gratification, you got to get the money. You have to have the health to do it. You have to, it's just a big burden. Towards Krishna consciousness, if you can just hold up the beads, that's all the burden you need. Hare Krishna. Bearing the burden, the vimudhan, these fools, the great fools who are trying to enjoy this illusory happiness of sense gratification and having turned away from you, I'm in anxiety for them. And that's what paradukkha dukhi means. You see? This is the mood of any great Vaiṣṇava, like Shiva and all the way down, is that they're loving Krishna and they're feeling the happiness and the absence of real anxiety in their life, the benefits, but they see other souls who are not feeling that, who are out of ignorance. They don't understand what's good for them, how they can achieve happiness. So they dedicate their lives to giving them. So the next verse is a parallel verse, is the same verse, and it's exactly the mood here. So the next verse, he talks about other munis and yogis and so. Prayena deva muneyo svavamukti kama maunam chadandi bhajanena padarthanishta. There in two lines, concisely he describes those transcendentalists who are really subtle materialists. The second verse of the Bhagavatam begins with the famous words, Dharma projatakaitavo tra. Here, tra, in this Bhagavatam, we kick out all cheating religions, right? Now, what are those cheating religions? Prabhupada explains, I think in that purport, or maybe when he explains the verse in a lecture, that Sridhar Swami, the first and most authoritative commentator on the Bhagavatam, says that the desire for mukti is also one of those things, and the attempt to get it, the dharma to do that, is also within the cheating religions. Because mukti itself is just a selfish desire. And then and Prahlad describes it. That's why he says, Swavamukti Kama. Swavamukti Kama. It's a type of lust, type of material desire. And what do they do in pursuance of this mukti? Maunam charanti. They're silent and they wander. Where? Vijane, where there's no people. In the Himalayas, in the forests, anything to get away from the distractions of the other people. I want my mukti. I got to detach myself from matter. Maunam charanti vijane naparartha nishta. Nishta means determination, strong determination. Napara artha means for the benefit of others. They are not at all determined to help others. They don't have any focus like that. So Prahlad says, I'm not like them. Nayanam bihaya kripana. I can't give up these fools and rascals and go to the forest and just ignore them, or go to my bhajan kuti. No. Vimamuksha eko, being solely for my own liberation. Because nanyam tadasti shadanam brahmato nupashe. My dear Lord, I don't see any other shelter for them or benefit them except you, and I have to give them you. I have to be the Prabhupada's famous via medium, or just a medium. I have to be a representative of you and teach. And he's already done that with his friends. He said they were on the way to becoming nicely trained demons, right? But they became devotees by the influence of Prahlad, and that's why his father saw him as so seditious. He was undermining the kingdom, with training the next generation. So that's what the Shiva is like, and he's expressing that in the verse we read today and the other verses before. He's seeing that the danger of the poison spreading everywhere, So he takes it upon himself, this austerity. Somehow by his mystic power, he shrinks it down to a little handful. He drinks that and saves everybody. He's famous for that. But we have Shiva is a very interesting figure because he seems to be sometimes like in this very pastime, he's doing this wonderful service, but then he gets bewildered by Mohini Murti, famously, and he runs after her and he shows bad example, as a of course it's Krishna, but it's still. So that's there. The pastime of Aniruddha and Usha and Banasura, right? So Aniruddha was, part of Krishna's kingdom in Dwarka. One of his, was his son or grandson, I think. I forget. But anyway, so he was kidnapped. Usha, the daughter of Banasura, she had a dream about Usha, and she was with her girlfriends in the inner sanctum of the palace, and they noticed that she was showing symptoms of attraction for somebody in her dream. So who came with the Chitralekha? I think Chitralekha came, and she's an artist. That's what it means. She could draw. So he says, "Okay, I'm going to draw various handsome young men, and when you see the one you like, you let me know, and then I'll go get him for you." So that was the implication, which she did. So when she drew all these, she drew Krishna, and she was attracted, but then she drew Aniruddha, and she said, "Oh, that's the one I saw in my dream." So then Chitralekha had this power of flying through the space and going into the palace and taking Aniruddha in his sleep and coming back and bringing him all the way back to Banasura's palace and presenting him to Usha. And before long, they were having this big affair, in the inner sanctum of the palace, which is supposed to be protected. She had all the guards, so no one would get in. So anyway, I don't want to tell the whole story. It's not necessary. So Aniruddha put up a good fight, but he was outnumbered and he was arrested. And meanwhile, the Krishna and Balaram and everyone heard about it back in Dwarka, so they all went to Manasura's kingdom with a big army ready to fight him, get Aniruddha back. So Banasura was a great devotee of Lord Shiva, and so he got some benediction, and Banasura, out of his love for Shiva, or he was given 1,000 arms, and he learned how to play the mridanga, many mridangas, and maybe kettle drums, and maybe some shakers. And he was able to do a concert all his own for Shiva's dancing. He likes to dance, right? So that's the way he'd perform service. But Banasura, who was after all a demon, although he was a descendant of Prahlad, he wasn't going to get killed. He asked Shiva I got all these arms, And I've got nobody wants to fight me, and I'm so powerful, so I have to just beat him against the mountains, the exercises. Isn't there someone who I can fight? So Shiva chats him, you're going to meet someone who's going to, fight with you. So Banasura is all enlivened by that. So anyway, what happens is that eventually Krishna comes, and I think Balaram, everyone comes. And there's a big battle, and Shiva, he's the benefactor of Banasura. So he doesn't fight directly with Krishna, but he has his Shiva Dwar, his weapon, the Shiva Dwar. I think it's a heat weapon, right? And so Krishna says, he manifests his Vishnu Dwar, which is a cold weapon. Prabhupada says in the Krishna book, when there's heat, heat, a lot of you think of heat, hot summer, you can somehow stand it, but when it's cold, everything collapses. So anyway, the cold weapon beats the heat weapon. And then Shiva, I think, comes before and he offers his glorification of Krishna, like that. So Shiva, and of course he became totally, furious when Sati performed self-immolation, because Daksha, her father, wasn't honoring Shiva. He kept insulting him. So she went to a sacrifice where he was, and she decided to sever her relationship with her father by killing herself, like that. So Shiva became super angry, and he sent Virabhadra and a whole bunch of his other ghostly followers and everything, and they destroyed the sacrifice, and they beheaded Daksha and gave him a goat's head, I think it was. So that's, he got angry. I mean, Shiva got angry, and you can understand why, So anyway, he manifests different aspects. And this whole thing, he wasn't omniscient, he wasn't, careful enough with Vrikasura, and got into trouble there. He was, that would never happen to Krishna. He doesn't have to run from any old demon, just annihilate him. So Shiva sometimes has different, characteristics. But here we see that, he has his own Rudra Sampadaya, and he's manifesting this Paradukkha Dukhi quality, which all devotees should have. Of course, we can't, drink an ocean of poison or anything like that. But we can be sympathetic and empathetic to the suffering of the people, living entities, and even other animals. We can chant Hare Krishna, give them some prasadam. But mainly, we can try to give the knowledge to the suffering souls. That's the Sankirtan movement. And that's the most pleasing service to Krishna. That's why he says, Nata tasma manusheshi kastume priya kritama. Those who share this knowledge, O Arjun, he says this near the end of the Bhagavad Gita, there's no one more dear to me than he or she, to share. Because why? Because it actually can enter the heart of the conditioned souls. They can become interested in this fascinating science, and they can learn the process of how to become Krishna conscious and actually be relieved of all of this misery. Eons and eons of births of tremendous suffering can be eradicated. So we have the greatest valuable thing. What could be more valuable than a means by which you can end this long suffering that we've been doing, birth, old age, birth, old age, disease, and death, and threefold miseries that we've all been going through since time immemorial. So there's nothing more valuable than that. We have access to it, and we have Prabhupada gave us the tools, the books, of course the mantras, so essential, foundational. And we can also adopt this principle of Paradukkha Dukhi. And this is part of a verse describing, I think, Raghunath Das Goswami. Or Raghunath was describing Sanatana Goswami, I'm sorry, I forget. But it's one of our foundational mottos, It's Aham Brahmasmi, Paradukkha Dukhi, Bolo Krishna, Bodha Krishna, Kodo Krishna Shika. This is kind of the summary of the movement, Lord Chaitanya, this phrase? This was what Lord Chaitanya told Nityananda and Haridas to tell the residents of Navadvip. They would knock on the doors, and they would come, and they would say, oh, sadhus, sadhus. Okay, chant Krishna's name and worship him with all your heart. Follow his instructions. Now that was basically it. But then I added the other one, and to others them impart. In other words, this way the movement spreads. That's where we've got the instruction. To chant Sri Krishna's name, worship him with all your heart, follow his instructions, and to others them impart. Right? So that's another one that, for the members of this Hare Krishna movement. But that was Lord Chaitanya's, summary instruction of how to spread Krishna consciousness. And for those who are really Paraduka Dukhi, like Nityananda and Haridas, they risked their lives doing it with Jagai Madai. But it all came out perfect in the end. Lord Chaitanya delivered them. So it's a great adventure, actually. And the world, I'll tell you, years ago when I joined, I said, really? It's supposed to last another 427,000 years? I mean, I've already been, I was there for the Cuban Missile Crisis and other crises, and then there's an app not an app, but a site that says there were like 40 or 50 near destructions. There was one Russian guy. He's working for the Defense Department there, where they have, I forget what they call it, and he's watching the computer screen, to see if the Americans are sending over any missiles. And suddenly he sees on there what looks like a big missile attack, Now, what was he supposed to do? When he saw that, he was supposed to call the headquarters of the defense, and they would take it from there. And what they would do is launch the missiles for America, and that would be the end of the world. But he didn't do that. He said, this doesn't look right. How could it be? This doesn't make sense. So he kept checking, rechecking. Sure enough, he found it was a computer glitch. And he was later brought over to America many years later. I think he's gone now. He's died. But this was probably in the late 90s or something. And they honored him for saving the world by not making that call. This is how close it's been. Now, I always see this as, Krishna's hand is in there. There's been so many close calls. But the history of how Prabhupada came and when he came, they'd already had the Cuban Missile Crisis was in 63, I believe. No, maybe it was 61, 62, the year before Kennedy was assassinated. But Prabhupada came a few years later, right? And he came in the middle of this hippie era when there was a lot of ferment, and by the nature of the drug, of LSD, you think that you're seeing God, and sometimes you think you are God, all this hallucination business. Be that as it may, most of the people who first came to the storefront had been taking it, and so there was a fascination with it. I mean, you may not know this, or you may have forgotten, but Hayagriva and Kirtananda, before they met Prabhupada, they went to India in search of a guru. Did you know that? And how did they get there? Jaladuta. Is that an accident, or is that? So they went on the same ship. They went and they couldn't find a guru. They couldn't find a sadhaka. So they come all the way back here and on Houston Street, two blocks from the storefront. Hayagriva runs into Prabhupada taking his walk. They go from there. So anyway, it just seems there's so many amazing things that happen that'll enable Prabhupada to actually plant the seed. The second volume of the Lilamrita, of the 6th volume Lilamrita, is all about planting the seed. First volume is a lifetime in preparation, all of Prabhupada's life in India. They did so much research. And planting the seed means that he found fertile ground in the hearts of those first devotees, that they were willing to hear him and take part in the process and surrender to him. And that otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here. And I'll tell you, if Prabhupada had been landed in, East Rutherford, Connecticut or something, I don't think he would have found that group. That was one of the main spots, that Lower East Side Manhattan, and of course San Francisco. And anything in between wouldn't have worked. Butler wasn't going to work. He came to Butler. Okay. So he said, look, let me go to New York, the most important city in the world. So you can see Krishna, favoring this and putting his hand in and, guiding this thing so that it happened, and it's all, and we're part of the revolution. Okay, so any comments, questions on this? Shiva is saving the scene now, and then so that the process can go on, and then other things are going to come up. What else comes out of the ocean? Who remembers? Besides the poison, Huh? Dhanvantari comes eventually with the nectar. That's later. Airavata, the big Indra's elephant. Lakshmi comes out. The moon comes out. A lot comes out of that. What is it? Oh, really? Parijati comes in? Okay. Yeah, it's amazing. All right, if there are no questions, anything online? Vijay?
Yes, Dravida Prabhu.
You have a question?
Yes, my question is, how do you explain that after drinking a whole ocean of poison, Lord Shiva didn't die?
Well, we know that Lord Shiva is not Krishna, right? But he's in between. He's got his own tattva, right? There's Krishna, and then there's Shiva tattva, then there's Jiva tattva. So Shiva is not an ordinary jiva. I think if any jiva had drank it, they would be gone. So he had this power, one of his many powers, that he could tolerate that. And he also shrank it down to a little handful, So all I can say is that Shiva he's not Jiva Tattva and he's not Vishnu Tattva, but he's very powerful. He's super powerful. And he also doesn't get old and wrinkly, that's another thing. So he's one of the three avatars or expansions of Krishna who is running the modes of nature. He's in charge of the mode of ignorance, and so he's not an ordinary living entity. So he could do that. We shouldn't try it. Prabhupada says, don't try to smoke ganja like Shiva, because many of his followers had been smoking ganja, marijuana. So he sets a bad example in that respect. But Shiva, Shiva, and then he gets. What is the other thing that happens with Shiva? Of course, he used bad judgment with Vrikasura, right? He gave him a boon, give them the demons any boon they want, But he was saved by Vishnu. So that's all I can tell you about that. That he's super powerful, and he's also super merciful. But he also has these things that happen where he gets super angry. Understandably, when Sati self-immolated, and he just sent his ghostly followers out, and they created havoc, and they beheaded Daksha, like that. Ultimately, Daksha, I think, was reformed in his next birth. But Shiva is a very important figure. I'll just tell you the one adventure I had with Shiva. I didn't never really worship Shiva before I came to the movement. But back in the early 90s probably, I would get on the altar. I had some altar service, not dressing, but artiques. And one of I was doing for a while was the evening artiques several nights a week. So I came one night and it happened to be Shiva Ratri. Now, many of you have heard of Dr. Devuri. Does that name ring a bell to anyone? Paneshri's father. He met Prabhupada, met him, and he was pretty much of an arch impersonalist. He was a worshiper of Shiva, but he was in Mayavad. And Prabhupada had some discussions with him, and he became a devotee. But he also had a lot of leanings toward Shiva worship. So it's Shiva Ratri, and I'm doing the evening artik, and I look, and there's the Shiva Linga, right up there next to the fountain. And there were all these offerings around it. They made offerings of prasadam, of food, to the Shiva Linga directly. And Dr. Devuri, he was dressed just like Durvasa Muni, and he was chanting all these mantras to Shiva, to the Shiva Linga. I said, this isn't right, but what could I do? I was doing the artik. So I said, next year, I'm going to ask if I can be in charge of running the Shiva Ratri night. So I did. And it rolled around, and I said, okay. So I said, we're going to read some of the verses that I read from the Song of Shiva. And then I told him, no, you can't offer directly to the Shiva Linga. The Shiva Linga can be off on the side, and you give the Shiva Linga the prasadam of Krishna. That's the proper mood. You see what I'm saying? And then I read some of that song of Shiva, and how Shiva is a great Vaishnava. Therefore, if you want to worship Shiva, you want to please Shiva, become a Vaishnava. That's what, chant Hare Krishna, And then we sang Hare Krishna, but we used to do this on the street. Where you say, Hare Krishna, Chaturmukha, I forget how the sound, but it's describing Lord Brahma in the Kirtan. Chaturmukha with the 5. And then Panchamukha, some say that Shiva has 5 faces or something. Anyway, so that way you could chant Hare Krishna and also worship Shiva at the same time as a great Vaishnava. As a great Vaishnava. So we never, I never thought, I don't think they did, I don't think we even really observed Shiva Ratri in such a fancy way any later than that. That was, Dr. Devuri's thing. So anyway, that was my service to Lord Shiva. And reading about him here. This is also service. Okay, so that's the best I can do, Vijay. He's very, very powerful.
Yes, and you did it very well, Prabhu, as expected. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Haribo. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Haribo.